from the CEO of the nation's largest automaker, General Motors, about the impact of the tariffs on the car industry.
Posted, Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs as the reason for raising prices throughout the chain. They should, as is said, eat the tariffs.
So Walmart came out and said that they're also going to have to raise prices because of the tariff increase.
In May 2025, Walmart quietly dropped a bombshell. Over 5,000 everyday products from groceries to clothing are set to become more expensive. The reason: a sharp spike in import costs driven by a new wave of tariffs. But Walmart isn't the only one feeling the pressure. Ford has delayed the release of 3 upcoming vehicle models, blaming rising material costs and mounting supply chain disruptions. Nike has tacked on an extra $10 to the price of most sneakers, thanks to higher duties on Asian-made apparel. And over in Milwaukee, Harley-Davidson is shutting down part of its U.S. operations and quietly shifting production overseas. Even as America talks tough on trade, its most iconic companies are backing out, not because they want to, but because they have to. What was meant to protect U.S. manufacturing is now pushing it across borders, some to Mexico, others to India, and increasingly to Canada, where costs are lower and policy is less volatile. This isn't a trade war abroad. It's a slow industrial retreat happening right here on American soil. In early 2025, President Donald Trump made good on one of his biggest economic promises: a dramatic return of broad-based tariffs. With rates reaching as high as 50%, the new measures targeted imports from China, Vietnam, and Mexico, key players in America's consumer goods and manufacturing supply chain. The goal: to reverse what Trump described as decades of economic surrender, restore U.S. factory jobs, and force corporations to bring production back home. At campaign rallies and press briefings, it was sold as an urgent national correction, a reset of the global order in favor of the American worker. But just a few months into the rollout, the cracks are already showing. Instead of opening new plants in Detroit or Pittsburgh, many companies are quietly moving operations elsewhere. Not to China perhaps, but to India, Indonesia, Eastern Europe, and even Canada. Because while the tariffs may block cheap imports from traditional partners, they don't eliminate the fundamental reason companies moved overseas in the first place: cost. And as U.S. production becomes more expensive, not just due to wages, but regulatory hurdles, infrastructure gaps, and policy volatility, businesses are responding the only way they know how: by minimizing risk.
The cost of living in this country is currently, it's not going to be, it is currently unsustainable.
For many, Canada has become an unexpectedly attractive alternative. Just across the border, it offers access to U.S. markets, political stability, and a more predictable trade environment, all without the chaos of sudden tariff changes. Canadian manufacturing zones in provinces like Ontario and Quebec have started to receive new attention, not from Canadian firms, but from American ones looking to stay close while avoiding the cost of staying in country. And with the U.S. preoccupied by internal economic battles, Canada is seizing the opportunity to quietly scale up. Meanwhile, back home, the economic fallout is spreading. According to a June 4, 2025 CNBC report, the new tariffs have already cost U.S. consumers over $50 billion this year, primarily through higher prices at checkout. Walmart, Target, Best Buy, none have been able to shield their customers.
Take a look at this. All right, so that's what we got in our trolley. Now I'm going to show you how much it cost. There we go. $51.
From food to footwear, smartphones to school supplies, prices are up across the board, and the impact is especially hard on low and middle income households. And the promised factory jobs still missing. While the headlines talk about revitalization, the reality is stagnation. Major employers have delayed hiring, training programs are underfunded, and while a few symbolic groundbreaking ceremonies have taken place, actual production is still months, if not years away. The jobs haven't come back, but the costs have arrived early.
5.4% unemployment in the state of Michigan in February of 2025, up from 4% just last year.
What's emerging is a troubling paradox. A trade policy designed to protect American industry is instead accelerating its offshoring, and not just to Asia, but to U.S. allies like Canada, who now stand to benefit from America's economic overreach. Corporations aren't defying the system, they're adapting to it. And so far, that adaptation has meant moving away from the very country that's trying to keep them in.
They had us go to the wreck at about 1:30 and they broke the news to us and they had us go to the dorms, pack our stuff.
The result, a quiet economic drift not into chaos, but into a new kind of imbalance, where the rhetoric of national strength masks a growing dependence on foreign production, where the burden of policy falls not on executives or politicians, but on working families struggling to keep up with the cost of Made in America.
They're closing Job Corps at the same time that they're having an enlistment shortage in the military. Job Corps has 119 centers nationwide. They serve about 25,000 students this year, but prior to COVID, they served about 60,000 students.
For many of America's biggest and most iconic companies, the return of high tariffs in 2025 hasn't led to the manufacturing renaissance promised by policymakers. It's triggered something very different, a strategic withdrawal. The rhetoric may be America first, but in boardrooms, the strategy is survival. And right now, survival means going global again. Take Walmart, the country's largest retailer and a bellwether for middle-class consumption. Faced with steep import duties on goods from Asia and Mexico, the company has begun quietly rerouting large portions of its supply chain not to the U.S., but deeper into North America. Mexico, under the USMCA agreement, has become Walmart's backup engine for logistics and production. At the same time, domestic inventory levels in U.S. stores have been reduced. Shelves in some regions are noticeably thinner, especially in rural areas. According to CNBC, products are disappearing faster than they can be restocked, and consumers are paying more for less.
What's up, America? Walmart, Target, Christmas toys. So Walmart and Target and several other retailers are now saying that there may not be enough toys for Christmas at their stores.
In the auto sector, GM and Ford, long held up as symbols of American industrial, might have also taken a hard look at the numbers, and they don't like what they see. Both companies have slowed U.S. production, postponed new model launches, and delayed investments in key domestic plants. The reason many of their suppliers, particularly for low-margin components like electrical harnesses, brakes, and seat fabrics, are based in tariff-affected regions. Resourcing these items in the U.S. would take years and cost billions. So instead, the companies are expanding partnerships in countries like India, Thailand, and Hungary, where costs are manageable and trade restrictions are lighter. Meanwhile, Nike, one of America's most recognizable consumer brands, is passing the impact of tariffs directly to customers. Rather than bring production home, Nike is spreading its supply web wider using price tags, not as signals of quality, but as shields against policy fallout. While the company publicly cites higher costs for rubber fabric and synthetic materials sourced from Asia, the deeper truth is this Nike isn't reshoring. It's simply diversifying suppliers while protecting its margins and letting customers absorb the difference at checkout. The trend is even more pronounced in heavy industry. Companies like Caterpillar and Harley-Davidson, long associated with American engineering and pride, are now making quiet exits from key U.S. operations. Operations aren't just relocating, they're being re-engineered, not for scale, but for survival. And for the workers left behind, that shift is anything but quiet. Harley's Milwaukee plant is winding down with portions of production shifting to Asia. Caterpillar, facing ballooning steel prices, is actively scouting sites in Poland, Slovakia, and India for new machinery assembly lines. The move isn't personal, it's economic. These companies aren't trying to betray American workers, they're just reacting to a system that has suddenly made Made in America far more expensive than it used to be. But not every company is looking halfway around the world. Some are going just north to Canada. With its stable trade policies, access to U.S. markets, and streamlined regulatory environment, Canada has quietly become a top-tier manufacturing alternative. Provinces like Ontario and Quebec are already seeing increased interest from U.S. firms not only in auto parts, but also in electronics, pharmaceuticals, and consumer goods. The advantage: close proximity without the chaos, and a government that's actively welcoming new investment as the U.S. economy becomes harder to predict. What we're witnessing isn't a short-term supply chain tweak. It's a structural reset. Companies aren't waiting around to see if policies change. They're building new ecosystems that will outlast election cycles. The idea of coming home has been replaced by the cold logic of operating anywhere but here. And while political slogans may still promise a resurgence of U.S. manufacturing and corporate headquarters across America, the strategy is clear: adapt globally or fall behind. In the end, this isn't about loyalty, it's about leverage. And right now, the companies that were supposed to be the face of American industrial revival are doing what they've always done best, moving fast, minimizing risk, and quietly leaving. While corporations shift their strategies and supply chains, it's everyday Americans who are left holding the bag. Across the country, thousands of workers have seen hours cut, contracts frozen, or jobs quietly phased out as companies adapt to rising costs. Plants that once promised long-term employment are now being restructured, and hiring plans are on pause. The hardest hit workers in mid-sized towns where manufacturing jobs were already disappearing long before the tariffs returned. On the consumer side, the story isn't any better. For shoppers, the hit isn't subtle. A grocery bill that used to stretch the week now barely lasts the weekend. The math has changed, and not in their favor. For families living paycheck to paycheck, that's not just inflation, it's a gut punch. Unlike companies, most Americans can't reroute their lives to Mexico or Canada. They can't hedge risk in foreign currencies or restructure a global operation. Their margin for error is thin and shrinking. So while politicians argue over trade imbalances and CEOs talk about strategic diversification, the reality on the ground is simpler. Things are getting more expensive and more uncertain, especially for those who can afford it the least. And if this is what economic protection looks like, it's not protecting the people who need it most. We said we wanted to protect American jobs, but the factories are leaving. We said tariffs would stop China, but it's American families who are paying first and paying most. Billions have been poured into policies meant to bring production home. And yet what we're seeing is the opposite: supply chains scattering, costs rising, and companies quietly moving offshore. Not to betray America, but to survive it. So is this a bold economic strategy to reclaim control? Or just a slow-motion corporate exodus hiding behind the flag is made in America, making a comeback or becoming more of a slogan than a solution? What do you think? Are tariffs saving American industry or pushing it out? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real talk about global trade economic power plays and the stories no one wants to say out loud, hit subscribe and follow for the next episode. Because this isn't just a trade war, it's a mirror. And the reflection might not be what we expected.